Welcome to Everyday Economics, the podcast that helps you learn about the economic world happening around you every day. I'm your host, Krug, president of the 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan Franklin News Foundation. Everyday Economics is a production of America's Talking Network. You can check out all of our podcasts at americastalking.com. To support podcasts such as this one, please make your tax-deductible charitable contributions by clicking the link in the show description. We're recording this episode on Thursday, August 17th, and join me as always is Dr. Orphe Divounguy, PhD economist. Dr. O, a lot of the stuff that you and I talk about on Everyday Economics is in the news, current. You know, we're not trying to be academic. When we could be academic inside of current events and topics that are relevant, I think we try to do that, and I think you do a fine job, again, of simplifying things that are complex. In the last 24 hours, I've had an opportunity to do some reading about what the Federal Reserve is talking about, specifically what they've released in their minutes. And I want to share the top 3 headline results from Google. Result number 1 is from Reuters. The headline is, Fed meeting minutes could hint at end of rate hikes. Headline number 2 is from the New York Times. With investors on edge, Fed minutes take on new urgency. And number 3, from the USA Today, FOMC meeting minutes today, Fed may hike interest rates again. Well, that seems to be perfectly in alignment. It looks like, I mean, I'm all for, for original reporting and the gathering of facts independently. I mean, I'd hate to see, a media that any more, sings from the same songbook and just, delivers news, as if it were being just, dispatched by government and taking government's word for it. But my friend, these are 3 major U.S. media nameplates, and they don't look like they went to the same.
They don't seem like they read the same thing we read.
Journalism's hard. If you've never done it before, it's not an easy gig.
I'm really glad you started with this, Chris, because, that is the kind of contribution that this podcast was hoping to be able to make, to kind of reconcile the information that's out there, or at least try to, and make sense of it. You read 3 different headlines, very different headlines from major news outlets. And so I'm going to kind of dive a little bit into this. The Fed releases its minutes from its previous meeting. And what it revealed was that not all, but almost all participants, right, voted in favor of raising the federal funds rate by 25 basis points to 5.25%, to the range of 5.25% to 5.5%. And only a couple of participants indicated that they favored leaving the target range unchanged. In other words, not hiking rates again. And that's very different from what we had before, right? Remember, before, what we had was all participants voting in favor of raising the target Fed funds rate. And so you now have a Fed that's increasingly, and by the way, not by much, because it's only a couple of participants, but increasingly divided as to whether or not monetary policy is tight enough, or if more rate hikes are necessary. And so that is essentially what was in that document that everybody is talking about.
Well, and so first of all, I don't know that the vast majority of our listeners, or frankly, I don't know what percentage of our listeners. Let me phrase it that way. I mean, I think we have some pretty smart people who listen to us, and people that want, people that are interested and engaged, and they want to know more, and we appreciate that. I mean, it's why we created this. How the sausage gets made. I don't know that there are a lot of people who really understand that process. But and we could talk about that. But let me just first say this to support, and not I'm really not. I don't think I'm arguing with your point here at all. Chairman Jerome Powell said earlier this year, and I believe it was after May, that when we paused, that there would be, increases to that Fed fund rate, and there was a pause, and then there was an increase, and then we seem to be probably due for either a brief pause and then maybe an increase after the next meeting, or an increase after this meeting. Period. I mean, this is not out of left field, but let's talk about how the sausage gets made a little bit. So it's not always consensus. I don't know that people read the Fed minutes, but there's not always consensus involved. There has largely been consensus among Fed members in the last, whatever it's been now, 18 months of increases. I guess almost 2 years of increases, right? Now we're seeing maybe a little bit of questioning, or people that are breaking out. This is perfectly normal, is it not?
Absolutely. And I think the chair tries to bring everyone together, based on all of the available information that they have at the time. And I remember he always starts with a statement, they're at the service of the American people, and with a mandate to give us low and stable inflation that is consistent with sustainable economic growth. And of course, that means, dealing with inflation, but also making sure unemployment stays at a level that's consistent with that target. So, but that's how it works. The committee members are Jerome Powell, Board of Governors, John C. Williams, Michael Barr, Michelle Bowman, Lisa Cook, Austin Goolsbee, now at the Chicago Fed. And I was living in Chicago for a while, right? And working right next to the Chicago Fed. It's a beautiful, beautiful building. Patrick Harker, Philip Jefferson, Neil Kashkari, Lori Logan, and Christopher Waller. I argue Christopher Waller is probably one of the brightest people that I've ever encountered in my life. But yeah, they're very capable, very smart individuals who know exactly what they're doing. And so, yeah, a lot of people like to bash the Fed. The job is not easy. The responsibility is massive. And I think they're doing a terrific job. What's your takeaway from the Fed minutes? Just to close this out, I'll give you the last word here. Yeah, I think the Fed is just like the rest of us, seeing an economy that is cooling, but it's still somewhat too hot, right? And now the question is whether or not that cooling is going to continue, right? Are we really, we're seeing inflation drop rapidly, headline inflation drop rapidly. Are we on path to 2% in 2024? Or could that decrease in inflation that, by the way, has caused consumer sentiment to increase, will that decrease bring the consumer back out there, right? Causing this reheating, right? If consumers are shopping like crazy, which, by the way, I think they still are, and labor supply or the growth in the labor force, the increase in the labor force stalls, right? But labor demand remains very high. We're likely to continue to see higher wage growth, right? And maybe even wage growth take up again. And of course, that would be a problem because we probably would see it show up in higher consumer prices. So that is, I think, the worry, and the Fed is worried about that more than anyone. I think that's why the Fed maintains this, you hear the statement, the Fed will remain data dependent, right? They will keep track of everything that's available to them, as we do, by the way, on this podcast, which is how we're able to report all this stuff to our listeners. I appreciate your thoughts as always, Dr. O. It's great to spend time with you. For Orphe Divounguy, this has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics at americastalking.com.